It was supposed to be a normal night in a quiet American suburb until one chilling 911 call turned everything upside down. The call made investigators question what they thought they knew about reality itself. The emergency dispatcher first noticed something strange the moment the call connected. There was no panic, no screaming. There was no background noise that usually comes with distress. Instead, there was silence, heavy, controlled, and almost unnatural. Then a voice spoke, calm, too calm. A man identified himself, but his words didn't match the situation he was about to describe. He said there was someone inside his house, but he didn't sound scared. He sounded certain, as if he already knew how the night would end. The dispatcher followed protocol, asking standard questions: location, nature of emergency, whether weapons were involved. But the caller's responses were unusually precise, almost rehearsed. He gave details about his home, his street, even the timing of events before they fully unfolded. That alone made the dispatcher pause. Moments later, the call shifted. The man suddenly stopped answering questions and said something that was not part of any normal emergency report. He mentioned that they already know I called. There was no explanation of who they were, just a certainty that someone else was listening. He said staying on the line would change the outcome. That statement was logged as unusual, but not yet understood. Within minutes, a patrol unit was dispatched to the address. The neighborhood was reported as low risk, no prior incidents, no criminal history linked to the home. Everything appeared routine on paper. But the dispatcher noted something unsettling. The caller seemed to be describing events in real time before officers confirmed them. At one point, he mentioned headlights approaching his street before the patrol car even turned onto it. At first, it was dismissed as coincidence, until it happened again. The caller said, very calmly, "They've stopped outside." Seconds later, the officers confirmed arrival. The dispatcher, now more alert, tried to regain control of the call, but the line went partially silent, as if the phone had been moved away. In the background, there was a faint sound, soft, rhythmic, almost like footsteps, but distorted. Then the caller returned. His voice had changed slightly, still calm, but lower. He said he was not alone in the house anymore. No shouting, no clear threat, just that statement. The dispatcher asked him to leave the house immediately if safe, but the response was unexpected. The man said, "It's already inside." That was the first time the dispatcher marked the call as potentially critical escalation. Outside the house, officers reported no forced entry. Doors were locked, windows intact, no visible movement from outside. But inside the call, something was clearly unraveling. The caller began speaking in fragments, describing things that did not align with responders. He mentioned seeing movement in places where no one should be, hearing steps that stopped when he tried to focus on them, and feeling as if the house itself was reacting to him. Then came the part that investigators later replayed multiple times. The caller said he had stopped trusting his own perception. He wasn't sure whether someone had entered the house, or whether the house had always been occupied in a way no one had noticed before. That statement made the dispatcher briefly go off script. A second operator was brought in to monitor the call recording. Meanwhile, officers outside were instructed to maintain position and prepare for entry if needed. But before anything could happen, the caller made one final statement in part one of the recording. He said the emergency call itself might have been expected, as if dialing 911 was not an act of seeking help, but part of something already in motion long before the phone was picked up. And then, suddenly, the line cut. No warning, no static fade, just silence. Inside the dispatch center, alarms were triggered for immediate follow-up, but the situation had already escalated beyond standard protocol. The officers outside the house prepared to move in, And what they would discover next would make the entire case far more disturbing than anyone could have predicted. After the call dropped, the dispatch center attempted immediate callback procedures, but the line did not reconnect. Instead, it went straight to a dead tone, as if the phone had been disconnected or deliberately disabled. The patrol officers outside the residence were now fully aware that something about the situation did not match a standard domestic emergency. There was no visible disturbance from the outside, yet the caller's final statements had escalated the case into a high-priority investigation. They approached the house carefully, maintaining communication with dispatch. Still no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no open doors. Everything remained intact, which only deepened the confusion. Inside, however, there was something else entirely. When officers finally entered the home, they reported an unsettling stillness. Not silence in the normal sense, but a kind of absence, as if the house itself had paused. Rooms were in order, nothing overturned, no signs of struggle, yet the atmosphere suggested something had taken place moments before their arrival. Something that left no physical trace. The caller was not immediately found. That alone changed the entire tone of the investigation. Dispatch reviewed the 911 recording again and again, trying to match it with what officers were seeing in real time. But discrepancies began to appear that could not be easily explained. Certain details the caller described, like movement patterns and timing of arrivals, did not align with any physical evidence inside the home. It was as if the call and the reality were slightly out of sync. Officers began a room-by-room sweep. Still no signs of intrusion, no hidden individuals, no obvious threats. Yet the caller's last statement, "It's already inside," kept replaying in everyone's mind. Then came the first breakthrough. A side room, previously reported as unused, showed subtle signs of recent activity. Not forced activity, but intentional presence. Items were slightly shifted, not broken, as if someone had been there and left deliberately, but still no person. Meanwhile, dispatch uncovered something even more disturbing. The 911 call metadata showed a brief irregularity in signal transmission, an anomaly that didn't match normal cellular behavior in that area. It was short, only seconds long, but enough to raise questions about whether the call had been affected by interference or something else. Back at the house, officers noticed something odd. Several electronic devices were still on, despite the caller's phone being disconnected. A television flickered with static. A hallway light dimmed intermittently without explanation. Nothing that could be clearly classified as dangerous, but enough to unsettle trained responders. Then, the investigation took a sharper turn. A faint sound was reported from within the structure again, similar to what the dispatcher had heard earlier. Not footsteps, but something more irregular. A pattern that didn't match human movement. When officers followed the sound, it led them to a closed interior door. The door itself was not locked, but what was inside the room would later be described in reports as inconclusive presence. No clear suspect, no clear victim in immediate view. Just an environment that suggested something had recently been there and left without explanation. The absence of the caller became the central mystery. Where was the man who made the 911 call? And why did every trace of his presence feel like it was deliberately reduced, as if erased just enough to avoid leaving a clear answer? As officers expanded their search, dispatch replayed one final segment of the call, a portion that had previously been overlooked. In it, the caller had said something that now felt more important than ever. He had not said he was in danger. He had said he was part of something unfolding, and that the call itself was not the beginning, but a response to something already in motion. That realization shifted the entire investigation, because if the caller wasn't just a victim, then what exactly had he been involved in, and why did it feel like the house itself was waiting for them to understand? The search intensified as more units were called in, but what they would uncover next would push the case from unexplained into deeply unsettling territory. With additional units now surrounding the property, the investigation shifted from a simple emergency response to a controlled search operation. Every officer on site understood that something about the case didn't fit standard logic, but no one could yet define what that something was. Inside the house, the environment remained unchanged. Too unchanged. No signs of struggle. No clear exit points used in a hurry. It was as if the entire situation had unfolded without leaving behind the kind of evidence investigators expected. Then came the moment that changed everything. A deeper search of the lower level revealed a small, concealed space. It wasn't documented in the house layout. It wasn't hidden in an obvious way, just overlooked, as if it blended into the structure itself. Inside, officers found personal items belonging to the caller, not scattered, not damaged, carefully arranged, almost deliberately placed. That detail immediately raised more questions than answers, because nothing about it suggested panic. Instead, it suggested intention. Dispatch was informed immediately, and the 911 recording was reviewed again from the beginning. This time, investigators focused less on what was said and more on how it was said. And that's when patterns started to emerge. The caller had never truly sounded like someone reacting to an intrusion. He had sounded like someone following steps, as if he already knew the sequence of events that would unfold after dialing 911. Even more disturbing was the timing accuracy. His references to the arrival of officers and the stopping of vehicles matched real events with unsettling precision. Not prediction, synchronization. But there was still no explanation for where he went. No body, no escape route, no confirmed exit captured by surrounding units. It was as if the caller had simply ceased to be part of the physical space. Then investigators discovered something buried in the dispatch logs that had been initially dismissed as a technical glitch. A brief loop in the audio recording. A moment where the caller's voice seemed to overlap with itself, repeating a short phrase. That phrase was simple. It already happened. At first, it seemed like confusion under stress, but now it carried a different weight. Nothing suggested a typical unfolding emergency. It suggested something cyclical, controlled, almost rehearsed. Experts concluded that while there was no evidence of hacking, the signal irregularity aligned precisely with the moment the caller mentioned the police. As the investigation reached its peak, one final detail emerged. A neighbor reported a strange sense of repetition that night. The official report closed the case as unresolved. But within investigative circles, the case never truly ended. Because the recording still exists, was the caller trying to report an emergency? Or was the 911 call itself part of the event investigators were never meant to understand? If you found this case disturbing, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more unexplained 911 calls and unsolved American mysteries.